Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Diversification for Translators event, and I'm a warm welcome. I'd just like to say we're going to give it a few minutes for people to join. So if you'd like to tell us a bit about yourselves in the chat and introduce yourselves, tell us why you're here today, what you're interested in finding out about, tell us what the weather's like where you are. We'd be delighted to hear from you. I'm joined today by Nicholas Niku and Michael Callaley, and my name is Zoe Diedrich, and we're very excited to be here today. So please tell us a little bit about yourselves. Where are you joining us from? Nick, where are you?
I'm in London. So yeah, it's nice. Not really sunny at the moment. It's a bit grey, but it's fine. It will do. As long as it's not raining like it has been in the last few days, I'm happy.
It's very drab, isn't it?
Yeah.
How about you, Michael? Are you in London?
No, I'm in Leeds.
Oh, Leeds.
So, yeah.
What's it like over there?
It's not bad. It's a little bit grey as usual, but
yeah, is Leeds a grey place?
In terms of the weather, usually, yeah.
But not the people.
Not the people, no.
Okay. Excellent. Well, I'm in London as well, and it's grey and dull, but we are at the language show, so it's going to be an exciting morning. Oh, lovely. Hi, Elena. So, Elena, you're in Birmingham. Oh, yes, it's a bit colder up there. Oh, you're an associate lecturer for an MA in translation. Wonderful, wonderful. And tell us what have you come to join us for today? What are you interested in finding out about? We've got plenty to talk about this morning, haven't we, Michael and Nick?
We have indeed, yeah.
But we're not going to get started quite yet because we're still waiting for others to join who'll probably have been in other sessions before, and there's a little bit of a transition between. So we'll give it another 3 or 4 minutes, and we'll start at about 35 past, and we'll have an opportunity to hear, first of all, about Michael and Nick's career trajectories. Oh, hi Kirsten, hi Sally, Kieran, Clarice, lovely. So we have London, Hampshire, South Coast. Ooh, gale force winds down there. Okay, so you're looking to see how you can develop your skills. We've got Kirsten, who's from Grey, Herefordshire, specializing in psychiatric and psychoanalytical mental health. Oh, and yes, it's true. There's always other fields that we might branch out into. Tanya's from Salisbury. Anne is from Belgium. Wonderful. I'm from Luxembourg, so welcome, neighbor. Laura from South Wales and Maria from Brighton. Maria's just at the end of her studies, so thinking probably about which career to start out in. Xenia from Bath, beautiful city. And Danielle has been a translator for 25 years. Oh, Danielle, so 6 of them at the European Parliament. Very good. And you work as a freelancer, lots of languages there. So yes, it's true. It can be tough, but it can also be really rich and rewarding, can't it? Clarice, you're at London Met, brilliant. And then we're joined by, and in your 3rd year, we're joined by Andy from Spain. Oh, we'd love to be in Spain right now, wouldn't we?
Really?
And looking to diversify in layout and AVT. Lovely. Jenny from Herefordshire is starting out as a freelancer, so this is a perfect opportunity for you to find out more. Helen is from Rugby, brilliant. And Andrea, Swiss-German border. And you do 3 languages, fantastic. You stopped translating, but now it's a time to start again. And we've got Vanessa from Bath, Spanish to English, fantastic, and Nadine, Hertfordshire. Starting out, Rowan from Guildford. Brilliant. So we have a fantastic range of people today and please, so we'll start the session shortly. So just to introduce us briefly, my name is Zoe, Zoe Diedrich. I'm from the University of Westminster. I'm representing the university today. I'm a translator and interpreter, but I teach interpreting at the university. And I'm joined today by Michael Callerley and Nicholas Niku, who are seasoned experts in translation, who are going to be talking to you about their career trajectories and going to tell you how to use your skills to make the most of your career and to branch out and to explore and to find maybe new avenues, whether you're starting out or you've been working in the industry for a long time, or you're thinking of shifting from one area to another. The session is intends to really inspire you to go for it and to have an idea of how broad it can really be. So it's an opportunity for you to find out more about that. So what we'll do is we'll start with some intros, and I'll get Michael and Nick to tell us a little bit about their careers, how they, what their pathway was, and then we'll address the questions that we had, which are what services can translators offer over and above text translation, who is buying those services, and where translators can access continuous professional development in order to acquire these skills. We'll also, of course, be taking your questions from the chat. You're welcome to put your questions as we go along, or at the end I'll be fielding them. We'll try and get through as many as we can. I also want to welcome Caroline and Ati to the session, and I guess we'll make a start now. Michael, shall I go to you first and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yep. Hi everyone, I'm Michael Callerley. I'm representing a company which is a sports translation and media company called Blue Whale Global Media. Like most people, my first introduction to languages was through high school. I had like an innate skill for languages, and of course that made me even more interested because I was already quite good at them. I then carried on with languages through to university, where I studied a BA in Italian and Spanish. In my final year of my undergraduate, I was thinking about how to progress my career path already before I had graduated. Sports always been a big passion of mine and something that I've excelled in. So I decided quite early on, around like 14 years old, that I wanted to combine the two. And I had it in mind to become a football interpreter. So ahead of graduating, I decided to head onto Twitter and follow any people who were involved in the field. And if they followed me back, then I'd send them a little message to say, have you got any advice for an aspiring interpreter? That led me to come into contact with someone who's now my colleague, who offered me the chance to do a test in Italian, Spanish and English in order to be a proofreader, transcriptionist and translator for Blue Whale. And we worked on a lot of interviews with footballers, coaches, from FIFA interviews, UEFA interviews. We work alongside a lot of media companies and sports agencies. I worked through the end of my BA, doing translation, transcription, proofreading for the company. I then went on to do a master's in conference interpreting and translation studies. and I continued working for the company alongside my studies. And then in 2020, September 2020, I then became a coordinator for the company. And then last year that became full-time. And I'm now the chief coordinator and head of recruitment for the company. And we're progressing further and further, getting bigger and bigger as a company, contracts with UEFA, with FIFA, and we're going to be participating and helping out FIFA with the World Cup that's coming up in terms of translation of material that they need us to translate, especially for the president and anything to do with the fans, the people that might be there. So it's an exciting time and a busy time as usual.
Wow, that sounds like an amazing trajectory that you've had, and you've really made your dream come true, Michael.
Yeah, exactly.
You're getting a massive clap there on the side of the screen. That's very exciting. I've got lots of questions to ask you afterwards, but I'm going to go on to Nick. Nick, do you want to tell us a little bit about your career and how you came to do what you're doing at the moment?
Yeah, of course. It's a pleasure to be speaking to you all today, and I hope you will find it really useful. So my path was actually quite similar to Michael's in that I studied languages from quite a young age. I have Cypriot heritage, so I was going to a Greek school every Saturday alongside my English schooling from the age of 5 to 18. So I was doing that, and then started learning French and Spanish around 12 at school. And then as I progressed through, I realized I really enjoyed it, and I wanted to make it going forward something I wanted to do with my life. So it progressed to doing an A level and then doing a BA in French and Spanish at UCL. And then after I finished my BA, I had a year when I was trying to find my feet and figure out what I was going to do. And it was during that year that I started doing a lot of editing that I'd started doing during my BA for a Latin American culture magazine called Sounds and Colors. And alongside that, I was tutoring in French and Spanish. So I was already doing working with my languages at that point after my BA. And then during that year, I realized that I wanted to consolidate that knowledge even further. And I looked into different ways I could use my languages, and translation seemed to be the one that would be able to concretely use my language skills, but also fuse what I'd been doing in a writing sense with my editing. So after a year out from my BA, I did a master's in specialized and technical translation at the University of Westminster. And since then, I have been working as a freelance translator, translating from French, Spanish, and Greek into English. And I've also started to lecture at Westminster University, so teaching on the courses that I actually studied on as a student. And alongside that, I've been editing. So I'm a sub-editor for business-to-business publications. And I still do private tutoring as well. So the point that I wanted to get across during my brief introduction today was the idea that diversification is, I think, essential if you are a freelance linguist. The benefit of having different avenues of work is not only a way of differentiating the tasks that you do day to day so you don't get bored of any one thing you're doing, but also from a practical business standpoint. If there is a lull in work for one of the things that you do, it means that you can pick up on one of the other services that you offer in that downtime. So in the case of my translation career, my main specializations are medical texts and sports text. And in the sports field, I work with Michael actually very often now. And in both of those cases, I'm dealing with different things day to day. So in my medical translation, it will be the case that I receive a text document that I need to translate and then return. Whereas most often in the case of the sports work that I do, it's audio-visual. So I will receive an audio file or a video file that I then have to provide a transcript for or provide subtitles for. Now, I also offer revision services. So that would be reviewing someone else's translation. So that's a distinct process. It doesn't involve you having to translate the content, but it involves you having to look at someone else's and to be able to critically appraise it and only make changes where they need to be made. But I would strongly advise any translators that are starting out and that are attending this webinar to offer revision as a service when you are starting out. So not just to say that you're a translator, but to offer to any language service providers that you may apply to, say to them, I'm also willing to revise other people's translations. And the benefit here is that if you're not particularly aware of which specialism you want to go into yet, looking at other people's work, people who have been doing it for a longer period of time, could be a way of gaining some subject-specific knowledge. And it also means that if there isn't a great deal of translation work early on, you'll still be able to get some work reviewing other people's translations. In terms of the editing work that I do day to day, this is actually monolingual. So it'll be a case that an English language publication asks me to look at their content for publication. So I'll be sent articles and have to write headlines for them, stand first, which are kind of the little bit that you see underneath a headline, edit the content in terms of style and in terms of formatting. And that work is done in a separate piece of software called InDesign. So Adobe InDesign. So in the case of if you want to offer editing as an additional service, I would highly recommend looking into some additional software such as Adobe InDesign, which is one of the industry standards for editing work. And as I said, I also do teaching. So in the case of private tuition, I will be tutoring students in French and Spanish mainly of different levels on how to improve their grammatical competence, or if they're struggling with a particular topic, I have to help them with that. And obviously, as a professional linguist, that's incredibly useful because I'm able to basically keep tabs on my source language proficiency. So if I have to explain to a student how a grammatical rule works, I will be more attuned to that grammatical rule if it comes up in a text that I have to translate, and I'll be able to translate it more effectively. So I'll round off my little introduction here by just saying the aim that I've tried to go for with my career as a professional linguist is trying to have different services that I offer, but that there's a bit of a link between them, or there's synergy between them. When I'm tutoring, I'm working on my source language proficiency. And the same thing when I'm teaching, I'm having to field questions and have to ponder the way that I would translate, for example, when I'm teaching students. And when I'm translating day to day, I'm honing my target language skills, my English language skills. And that's obviously helped by editing English language content and seeing how other people might portray their opinions. So always look for different fields that you could look into, build on the experience you currently have, particularly if you're transitioning to translation from a different career, and just be aware that there is more out there rather than just simple text translation.
Wonderful, Nick. Thank you so much. That's so exciting as well. It sounds like you offer such a range of expertise and that you've managed to really get your interests going and really making a career out of it. And the both of you coordinate people, you work independently, you teach, you manage. So it's really, you've really come a long way from studying, but also I suppose you both started off, it sounds like you did your translation qualifications as, you know, that wasn't the beginning, that was just within, you decided to do the qualification to sort of change your career path. Is that right?
Yep. I think it's always essential, even though I didn't go into interpreting following my MA in Conference Interpreting Translation Studies that was heavily based on interpreting, but the skills that I learned from doing interpreting, massively boosted my vocabulary in my languages, finding different solutions and how to translate, and it just makes it so much easier getting used to different accents. which has helped with the work that we do at Blue Whale, which is mainly audio-visual translation. So that's always a bonus to be able to hear the different accents, to get used to not just solely text-to-text translation, which can be, as Nick said, sometimes you don't want to get monotonous work. You want to mix it up, change it, and I think the main thing really with doing these additional courses and your career development, then you find out exactly what you want to do, what you don't want to do. You know, you might as well give it a shot and try and work out, yeah, this is for me, this isn't for me, and you can always come out with some positives in the sense that, one, you know whether it is for you or not, but two, you've gained a lot of new skills that will be helpful and useful in other realms of translation and your career with languages in general.
And I suppose the good thing about it is when you're doing a lot, when you're fulfilling a lot of roles and you have the other things to rely on when one area is not so busy or you're learning about an area, is that you can still have some earnings and you still have some stability, and then it gives you the opportunity to transition towards other areas of interest, and maybe you'll drop some of the previous things you did and be offered opportunities like you both have, and it'll open up, and then you can start forging a new career, and that doesn't stop. What do you think about that, Nick?
That's absolutely been the case for me. As I said, in that year, kind of transition year, the two key things with the editing work I was doing and also writing, because as part of that, working for that magazine, I was also attending gigs and film previews and writing articles about them. So that was working on my target language competence. And then the tutoring was quite heavily a part of that year when I had several students at the same time of different levels. And then as I progressed and I did the masters, tutoring started to become a little bit less of my focus. I still do it. I've still got students that I work with, but it's about kind of pivoting and being able to still do what I was doing before and build on it in some ways, but then also dedicate more time to the things that I see myself doing as my main line of work. And definitely, as you said, in terms of, and Michael was saying, as part of my course, as part of my MA course, because I've seen we've got a question in the Q&A about what was useful about the masters. The question was about a translation diploma, but in my case, it was an MA. For me, I had the BA knowledge of the language, but that was more grammatical knowledge of the language and more, let's say, passive. Whereas when I did the masters, I was having to deal with different kinds of texts, whether it was financial, legal, medical, and the practical use of that, and having people around me who could look at my work and then appraise it and tell me what I needed to improve on was invaluable. But also it meant that I was able to say, for example, medical texts are what I want to translate as opposed to financial or legal, because I feel more attuned to that. And then a few years into my career, I love football. I'm a massive football fan. And the ability to be able to add that as an additional service made sense, because I have the background knowledge for football and for sport in general that I didn't have with medical.
And it gives you so much more ease and confidence.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But also that passion to be able to, the passion and the ability to want to undertake continuing professional development in that field as well, because you're constantly wanting, you're digesting that content anyway, so why not put it towards work? So I would also focus on that aspect. It's not necessarily about, it's about figuring out what field specifically you're interested in, not just ones that might be profitable necessarily, but just what are you interested in and what would you like to be doing day to day? So yeah.
Yes, and ultimately I think what everybody wants, particularly if you're a freelancer, is you want to be able to pursue what your interests are. So this leads me on to the question, well, where could a translator access continuous professional development to get some of these skills that you're talking about? I'll go to Michael for this one.
Yeah, For myself, a lot of the professional development that I've done has been through self-taught work, or just happening upon a job that I think I'll be interested in. Like we were saying about having a passion for what you do, that it's simply, you can find courses online, YouTube videos, simply downloading certain apps, for example, with subtitling. A lot of that from myself was self-taught, looking at videos, giving it a go, trying out different ways of subtitling. And for example, with a lot of the work that we do in terms of audio-visual translation, but also which was part of my master's in interpreting, a lot of the source material that you can get is easily found online, and that's what I do. For example, press conferences, especially in terms of the realms of football, you're never going to have a shortage of those to practice on, whether that's interpreting, translation, transcription. So the majority of what I've done has been, obviously, with aside from my master's and my BA, it's been a lot of self-taught research and trial and error, really. And then
so
being
you're
able to
talking
implement
about
that.
doing the research, yeah, so you're researching it and you're looking at
Yeah, exactly.
areas, and you're sort of going towards it, and from that point of view.
Yep. Yeah. And I think with
sorry,
we were saying with like finding an interest in something, it makes it much more enjoyable. Like I was saying, with watching press conferences to do with football, it's something that I'd usually watch anyway, or you can watch documentaries to boost your vocab on that certain field. And I think that's the best way to go about it, so that it doesn't become as laborious and as hard work. It becomes something fun to do, whilst also developing your skills and your your general idea of what needs to be done and used for your career.
Brilliant. And what about you, Nick, in terms of, have you done any courses that you could recommend that helped you along with your sort of changing gears, going into another direction? Anything you can tell us about?
Yeah, so I would divide that into two things for myself. So the first thing was, I did not have a medical background when I was starting out in medical translation. So it was a case of, basically, when I got my first professional task, it was about doing everything I physically could to make sure that everything was perfect, because I always aim for the highest quality possible. And if you haven't got the passive knowledge, like I said, that I do for football, for example, it's about research. And I'd say 90% of my day-to-day work is research-based as opposed to translation-based. So I think it's about finding the right resources. In my case, I teach computer-assisted translation tools at the University of Westminster. And that's something that I use day to day, whether it's a translation memory tool or a term base. And I'm a massive advocate of term bases, which is basically a database of terminology, like a very beefed up glossary. What I basically do is, on every assignment that I have, I do an extensive amount of research and save all of that research to my term base, so that I don't have to do that research twice. And so I can be confident of the quality that I'm providing. So in a translation sense, particularly when you're delving into a field that is new to you, it's all about putting the work in, and you only get out what you put in. So looking up what kind of parallel resources can I find? Is there a website that has already translated content that I can refer to and retrieve terminology from? Is there a source that is more reliable than another one? And a lot of it will be practicing. And also, as I said, revising other people's translations can be very useful in that sense, because you can see how other people are phrasing things in a particular field. In the case of editing, I'd obviously done pro bono editing for the magazine I mentioned. So I was getting feedback on that as I was going along. And although I didn't get paid for those articles I was writing and the editing work I was doing, it's led to paid work in future because I've got a portfolio of work that I can refer to that's online to people that want editing services. And what I needed to do beyond that, because I hadn't been using InDesign, is exactly what Michael said. I basically learned on the job. So I downloaded InDesign and I learned from my first assignment editing within the software. I taught myself how to use it, looking at videos on YouTube and PDFs I could find online. And then down the line, I found that there are some courses that you can do on LinkedIn, for example, which is specifically about InDesign for editors. So if you look that up on InDesign, you will be able to find that fairly easily. And there are courses you can do that cost a little bit more if you really want to get into the deep aspects. But for the most part, you'll be able to do most of it just by picking it up and giving it a go. And that's another thing I wanted to mention. So there's an element of not wanting to turn things down, opportunities down. Of course, if it's completely above, it goes completely over your head and you would feel out of your depth, then it's not a good practice to accept an assignment, whether it's a translation or something else, without giving it due thought. But sometimes you need to be pushed outside of your comfort zone. And occasionally it can be those opportunities that someone gives to you that you think, I'm not sure if I can do this. It can sometimes be those that when you give it a go, the worst that can happen really is you just don't do it again. So I would guard against being too wary of trying something new, of thinking I can't do that. If you think that you'd be able to, within the deadlines that are set, if you'd be able to learn those skills and be able to apply them to that assignment, then give it a go. There's not really too much bad that can happen apart from not doing that thing again.
That's so true, Nick, and it can be very daunting, and you might have to stay up all night to finish it to the deadline. But the first one is always the worst, and then it gets better from there. Who are the clients then? Who are you working for? I mean, you've explained a little bit now, but who are our participants here expecting to be working with?
So for myself, obviously, we have various clients. We've worked alongside the main ones. We have contracts with UEFA and FIFA. We also had work to do with other tournaments and projects on European club rugby, and a big one is different media companies as well that work alongside either the likes of UEFA and FIFA, or work separately to create documentaries on sport or other topics. And we help them, whether it's to translate a really long interview, in order to create a transcript. We help them with subtitling, and not only that, we help them out with a type of job that we call a quote check, which is either the media company will send the script that they want, as well as a rough edit that they've done. And obviously, because they can't understand the source language, they send it to us and we'll give them feedback on where they need to make edits to it in order to ensure that the video makes sense in the source language and also lines up with the subtitles. We've done that in person, online, but also just simply you can do it in the comfort of your own home by, making edits and notes on the script to send. But for us, that's the main people that we work with, sports agencies, media companies, and when I was a freelance, obviously I had steady workflow through Blue Whale, and I think that harps back to the point of working something that you're passionate in, but also something that's always going to have some sort of workflow. For example, with football or sport, there's always content to translate, whether that's around a specific tournament, whether it's weekly, or whether it's a documentary or anything like that. In terms of other freelance work that I did, I was lucky enough to have a lot of it fall into my lap, whether it was being recommended by people that I've worked with, or people contacting me through LinkedIn. directly to ask if I could help out. And I think that's the main thing, just having a presence somewhere and having some sort of connections and community that you're always going to have a constant workflow through either recommendations to other people or just on merit of your work and your efforts, that you'll be rewarded, and a lot of it comes out of the blue rather than having
LinkedIn, your LinkedIn profile, your professional contacts, but also professional associations for translators can be very helpful in allowing you to meet people, but also have that credibility that you're providing a quality service. What about you, Nick? Your clients, what kind of range of clients do you have?
So I can say the initial way that I got work through translation was through referral. So I was working as part of, which I still do now, I'm on the committee of a group called the ITI London Regional Group. And it was I'm the newsletter editor for that group, and a former editor basically met with me to talk about that, and then got me my first professional translation work by referring me, because she was winding down in her career and she wanted to help out newer people that were starting. So the reason I mentioned that kind of anecdote is because it helps to be present at events now that we're back to in-person, and particularly after COVID. It really helps, because sending a CV out to someone it falls into a sea of different CVs and applications. So when you can meet someone in person and get a good impression of yourself across, that's really useful. And the same goes for colleagues of yours. So there will be people who are working into different language combinations to yourself. And I think it's understated how important it can be to just chat with your fellow colleagues, tell them what you work in. And if you get a good impression across to them, they'll be willing to refer work to you if things come in a particular topic, for example. So if they don't work in medical translation, they work in legal, but someone contacts them and says, do you know anyone? They might have you in mind because you spoke to them and you've got that good impression across. More practically, in my case, it's been applying to language service providers. I quite like the flexibility that working with language service providers or agencies offers. But I've also worked with direct clients who have been referred to me because of word of mouth. So I think if you have a presence both online and in person, people are going to, as you progress, are going to be able to find you and work will come to you. But in the first instance, it will be a case of researching the companies that you want to work with. And then when you contact a particular company to work with them in a translation sense, there needs to be some kind of link between you both. So if you're contacting a medical translation agency and you're talking about legal experience that you have, that's not tailored to what they're expecting to receive. So they will be instantly switched off to what you are offering as a translator. So you need to have a tailored application to your clients. And you need to show an interest in what they're expecting to receive as well, rather than what you want to get from a relationship. In the case of editing, I would recommend looking up publications that offer sub-editing as a service. So sub-editing is what I was explaining before. So editing the layout and format of a text, doing headlines and things like that. It's also known as copy editing. And you can look up on Google, for example, sub-editing or copy editing rates, and you will see some publications that offer that service. And then you might be able to contact those publications directly to see if they need anyone. And then I've noticed with editing that if you do a good job, you do get quite a lot of referrals, because when people need editing to be done for their publications, they will go to someone that they trust. And they will go to a trusted colleague and ask them what their opinions are on someone they've worked with before. So don't underestimate the impact of word of mouth and referral, is what I would say.
That's such a good piece of advice, Nick. Thank you very much for that. Well, Helen asks, actually, she's asking you both, have you cracked the conundrum of getting a regular flow of activity with reasonable deadlines? That would be great throughout the year, instead of more quiet periods followed by crazy ones with multiple assignments, tight deadlines, all at the same time. Tell us what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I saw your reply, and the same phrase came to mind. With it's all about having like different strings to your bow. Some of my colleagues even have gone into reporting in order to use their languages. That's always something that people are looking for, people to either go and interpret, people to do the interviews themselves. In terms of managing that conundrum of having a steady workflow throughout the year, I think it's always quite a difficult one to manage. Obviously, as we've mentioned, having something working in a sector where there's always going to be work is always an easier way to get through that. But yeah, there's always going to be periods, depending on whatever sector you work in, if even football or sport, there's always the down time between seasons, for example.
Oh
It's
yes,
always
the
a bit quieter.
seasons.
So, and some of that, to be honest, is welcome. Because during the seasons it's very busy, especially with the way that sports are going now. There's always more games, as we're seeing with the World Cup happening now and nearly up to Christmas, which is more and more games and more content to translate, and that's good in one sense. But yeah, I agree with the sentiment that it can be a bit of a conundrum to be able to balance. I think a lot of it, in terms of those times where it's really busy, it's about, as Nick said, as referred to before, about feeling like you can't turn down opportunities. Sometimes you have to, for your own mental well-being and health, that you just have to take it steady. Obviously, work hard, but don't make it hard work, because that's obviously
so
not
true.
sustainable. I've been guilty of that myself at times, but you work through it, you work and find out how best to manage your time, to be organized, to really, I think the main thing as well is to set deadlines that are reasonable for you, because a lot of the times certain clients or agencies have unrealistic expectations. So if they don't agree with them, then obviously sometimes you have to let that go by the wayside.
Would you say that sometimes you can negotiate on the deadlines because they give artificial urgency to
Yeah,
any
definitely.
of this?
That's something that we even experience as a company ourselves. Everything needs to be ASAP. They've got
Tomorrow.
deadlines. Yeah, exactly. Deadlines that are supposedly immovable for us, but then they'll send the content after the supposed deadline's already gone. So it's just managing that and saying, no, I can do it by this date. I'll try my best to get it done by then, but it's more likely to be this point. And just basically managing yourself and managing your own expectations of yourself and the expectations of other people. And I'm sure that with the work that you do for people, with it being how the quality is good, people are more likely going to come to you to do the work, even if it might be slightly slower than someone who might do it in a more of a hurried fashion, let's say.
Yes, it's about building those relationships, Nick, isn't it?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything Michael said there. And that thing about deadlines, when I was starting out, there was a particular moment when I was thinking, there was one text I wanted to translate, but the deadline was really tight. And I thought, I'll be really careful about negotiating this deadline. And I gave myself a little bit more time. I said, could I maybe do it by this day? And then they were like, yeah, that's absolutely fine. It's not really that urgent. And I was thinking, I really could have asked for more time here. And at first, it seemed like it was very, very concrete, the deadline. But that one moment made me think, in future, then I'm going to ask for what I feel is the best case scenario. And if it's not that deadline, but it's a little bit earlier, it's still better because I've fed in enough time for myself. In terms of the conundrum of a regular flow of activity, I've got a situation at the moment when most of my weeks have defined days for doing certain things. So this week on Wednesday, I was editing for the whole day. Or yesterday I was teaching at Westminster remotely yesterday. Normally it's on site, but we had to do it remotely because of the tube strikes.
Yes.
So my Wednesday and Thursday was kind of set in advance, not the whole day. I could still do assignments in between, but in my head, Wednesday and Thursday were set for that. And then that means that for the other days of the week, on Tuesday, I tend to tutor in the evening. So then I've kind of got set days when I tend to do certain tasks. And then I fit in my translation work around that by negotiating my deadlines for those, because the the times for my editing and for my lecturing can't really be negotiated. So it's about negotiating the things that I can in and around that. And one thing that I do not negotiate on now, for the most part, is working on weekends. Early on, I used to work every weekend under the sun, but I realized what Michael was saying is kind of learning through practicing. And early on, I was working 7 days a week, and it's not sustainable.
You have to have your own relaxation time for your mind to be fresh.
Yeah, I think the problem is if you're a freelancer in particular, you can get into that mindset of thinking, I have 24 hours to fill with work. So the more time I have, the more I can earn potentially, or the more extra work I can take on. But the reality is your mental health and your physical health is going to suffer if you take on too much. And also the quality of your work is going to suffer at a certain point because you're taking on too much. So it's better to just kind of, measure. And if you really, like Michael said, spot on, if you think, if I take this on, is it going to jeopardize the other things I'm currently working on? Then maybe think twice, because you're not going to make anyone happy by accepting that job. And the key thing is you're not going to get repeat work if you cause a problem for a client by accepting a job and then saying, actually, I can't do this. It might not be the best situation, but there's always been cases, even with Michael, I've had cases when sometimes something comes up and you can't necessarily work on something you'd agreed on doing. Be communicative. Explain it as quickly as possible, because more often than not, there is a way that it can be resolved.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're going to end our seminar now, because it's time just to say thank you to both of you very much for your valuable contributions. Kieran says he's trying to manage his week and with negotiable hours, and it's a work in progress. Well done, Kieran, and well done to all of you. We're all in the same boat, I think. We all agree, but hopefully today's seminar inspired you. I'm inspired by Michael and Nick. Thank you for that. And just go for it, everyone. Just go for it, and believe that it can happen, because you can see from these two that you can make your dreams come true. Any final words, Michael and Nick?
I was just going to say, for anyone who wants to contact me personally about anything we've discussed today, on the speaker profile, I think on Zoom, you have access to my Twitter and my LinkedIn. So feel free to message me on that if you have any questions or queries.
Yep.
Brilliant. And Michael?
I'll just drop into the chat now the recruitment address, which is if you're interested in doing any sports work or anything like that, then you can feel free to get in touch with us. We're always looking for new translators, even transcriptionists or proofreaders. And we simply just ask you to do a short test, and then you might be able to work alongside us, both me and Nick. And
wow.
Yeah, it's we're never prejudiced against people who maybe haven't done any masters or anything like that. If you do the test and you're good enough, then that's good enough for us. So I'll just drop that email in now.
And none of you thought you might get a work opportunity out of this, did you? So that's really brilliant. Thank you so much, Michael and Nick. It's been really interesting and really fun. To everyone who participated, thank you so much for coming to our session today. And we hope that you enjoy the rest of the language show, and we hope to meet you again on some other occasion.
Yep, indeed.
Thank you then.
Thanks,
Take
everyone.
care.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.